Imagine a puppet whose strings feel like a warm embrace. Every movement is guided, every decision is made for them, and they feel perfectly supported. The problem comes when the strings go slack. Without that external tension to hold them up, the puppet collapses, unable to stand, function, or make a single move independently. In clinical psychology, this is the enmeshment or undeveloped self schema. It resembles two trees planted so closely together that their trunks have merged completely. The core belief is absolute. I do not exist without this other person. Healthy intimacy requires two people to remain separate individuals while staying deeply connected. In enmeshment, those psychological boundaries collapse until it is impossible to tell where your emotions end and another person's begin. This creates a clinical phenomenon known as the identity vacuum. When you aren't actively orienting around the needs, moods, or approval of an enmeshed partner or parent, you feel blank, disorganized, or even unreal. This plays out in everyday situations. Ask someone trapped in this schema, "What do you want?" and they may freeze in a panic. The act of wanting itself was never cultivated. Ultimately, enmeshment is the underdevelopment of a separate self, often mistaken for an abundance of love. This boundary collapse almost always begins in childhood. A child's identity gets absorbed by an emotionally over-involved, anxious, or needy caregiver. Through covert parentification, the child becomes the adult's confidant or emotional stabilizer. They constantly track the parent's moods and are used to keep the caregiver emotionally regulated. Many families reinforce this dynamic with rigid loyalty systems. In these environments, normal differentiation, like having a private thought or making an independent choice, is framed as disrespect or abandonment. The child is forced to internalize a devastating survival rule: independence is betrayal. When love is conditional on fusion, a child proactively sacrifices their own identity development to keep their caregiver stable. Adults with this schema fall into three distinct coping styles, attempting to navigate life without an internal boundary. First is surrender, or the fused self. They remain psychologically intertwined with others, consulting them on every choice. Autonomy feels dangerous and fills them with intense guilt. Then there is avoidance, or the emotional cutoff. This person distances themselves entirely from close bonds because intimacy triggers an overwhelming fear of being swallowed whole. Finally, overcompensation creates the reactive rebel. Their independence is loud, rigid, and brittle. They reject advice on principle, but this autonomy only exists in direct opposition to the enmeshed figure. Underneath these styles is a tug-of-war between a compliant child mode, terrified of loss, and a detached protector mode, terrified of engulfment. Whether a person clings, runs away, or fights back, their actions are still dictated by the gravitational pull of the other person. Recovery requires stepping into the healthy adult mode. This part of the mind allows for deep connection without the loss of self-definition. The first actionable step is identifying personal preferences. You must practice pausing and asking, "What do I actually want?" before seeking anyone else's advice. You can populate this self by building an identity inventory. This is a concrete list of your own values, tastes, and beliefs that exist exclusively outside the enmeshed relationship. The biggest hurdle is the guilt that arises when you set a boundary. You have to learn to tolerate this feeling, recognizing that it signals growth rather than harm. Psychological space is distinct from emotional distance. You are learning that two separate trees can shade the same ground without becoming tangled. Individuation allows two separate, whole people to love each other as equals. You can step out from the shadows and let go of the strings.